In this quick fix, we're going to look at a Mitsubishi HSU760. This is a VHS hi-fi machine, quite popular late in the game for VCRs. This one came in years ago by a friend, and there was a video done years ago, but it was really long and drawn out. This is a quick, to-the-point version of how to fix these most common problems. So this one here, this is what this machine looks like. If you've got any Mitsubishis that look like this, then this procedure will apply to them as well because they all use the same chassis. This one is totally dead, no power whatsoever, and when we open it up, we find that it has a blown fuse. And there's a tape jammed inside it. Now what happens on these is they develop weak belts which can bind up, draw excessive current, and blow the fuse. And that's exactly what happened to this one. But there is a procedure to get into this mechanism to change the belts. And I'm going to show you guys how to do it easily. Generally, when it fails like this, that fuse will be blown black, like something exploded in it. And that's because of the excessive current that was drawn when the motor's all jammed up. If you put a new fuse in, good chance it's going to blow right away. But it may start up and you'll hear like a squealing sound if the belts are just squealing, but a lot of times the belts are wound right around the pulley. They're jammed completely. It'll just blow the fuse immediately. First thing we need to do is remove the bottom. So we'll remove the screws, and there are a couple catches that we have to release. Push them catches in, and then the cover slides back, and then we can remove the base from it. The base has to come off because we need to be able to access the loading motor. Fortunately, they put a little cutaway there so that we can turn the loading motor by hand and see that it turns freely. And that way we can unwind the tape and eject the tape because we need to get screws out from the top in order to release the mechanism from the chassis. So we're going to, you see I'm checking the belt here. This belt is really loose and it was wrapped around the motor. That's what caused it to jam. So we're going to turn this loading gear to eject the tape. And you turn the gear clockwise, looking from the front, like I'm turning it there. That's the direction you turn in order to unload the tape from the head drum and then to operate the mechanism to raise the tape and remove the stuck cassette. Next, there's 4 screws on the bottom. They're silver in color. I'll show you the screws that need to come out. These screws actually attach the mechanism to the board, so if you don't take these screws out, and you try to lift the mechanism out, you'll end up with a broken circuit board. So these ones are kind of important to remove these 4 screws, and then we can proceed with the removal of the chassis. On the top side, there's 5 screws that need to be removed. 2 of them are in the bottom of the cassette housing, so through the chassis. That's why you have to make sure you take the cassette out first, otherwise you'll never be able to remove the chassis itself. And there's 3 screws on the back. 1 on the left, 1 in behind the preamp, and another one over on the right side. Once these 5 screws are removed, you can lift the chassis out. There is 2 plugs in the back. Best to hold the board down so the board doesn't flex and just give it a quick pull. The chassis will come out. 2 plugs need to be removed, one for the loading motor and the other one that connects to the preamp board. Remove the plugs. And now we can proceed to remove the loading motor. Removing these 3 screws, and the loading motor will lift to reveal the loading belt, which needs to be replaced, and the capstan belt shall also be replaced as they have both deteriorated on this one. The capstan belt, as you can see, is turned to mush. To remove the loading motor assembly, we just simply depress the release tabs on either side of the motor, and the unit will lift out just like that. Note the timing marks for the mechanism. Make sure that the mechanism stays in time. Don't start turning gears. The 2 holes need to line up. We will need to re-time the front loading mechanism by pushing the loading gear back as we put the motor in place to put tension on that main loading spring. If we look back at the loading motor, you'll see why the fuse blew, because that belt is in such bad shape that the belt itself actually wound itself around and stalled the motor. First, we need to remove the worm gear pin from the mechanism. Just pull back the lock and release the pin slightly. Then you can pull the belt off of the pulley so that it can be replaced. Once the new belt is installed, the loading motor is ready to reinstall in the chassis. I'm just fishing the new belt over the loading motor pulley. Make sure that the assembly turns smoothly before reinstalling. Now it's ready to reinstall. As the loading motor block is reinstalled, we have to set tension on the split gear for the front loader. We do that by pulling the gear towards us, towards the front of the machine, and snapping the loading motor assembly back into place. Now we can put the 3 screws back in, and we have the correct tension on the front loading mechanism. So the 3 screws go back in, and we'll install a new reel drive belt, and then reinstall the mechanism into the chassis, replace the fuse, and this one should be good to go. Just double check your alignment of your connectors with the board when you drop the chassis in. Those connectors have to connect with those 2 connectors in the back, and the way to put them in is just to line it up and push them straight down. Now reinstall the screws that hold the chassis in place, reconnect the loading motor and the power connector to the rear board, and the unit should be ready to test. Almost forgot, we got to replace that blown fuse. Now the unit's ready to test. Power's up, cassette loads, everything starts up, and the tape threads. Let's check out the picture.
All started with the snow. You see, it is a very special kind of snow.
I would
A snow that made the happy.
say that this machine is fixed. Let's eject the tape. I think that's the eject button. Maybe not. Maybe it's this one. That's the eject button. This machine is fixed. Hold your horses. We're not quite done yet. We want to check the lubrication on the pinch roller assembly because the grease has a tendency to dry out on these ones, and if it does, it is going to break that pinch arm. So we're going to remove the retaining clip and lift off the pinch arm so that we can re-lubricate that pinch arm post, because the grease on here dries out, and in this case it has. So we're going to put some lithium soap grease. I'm using Molly Coat, but there's lots of different synthetic lithium type greases that you can put on there. We're going to put some into the bearing here, the slider, and that will lubricate this pinch arm assembly to keep it running for years to come, because this is a very common problem on these ones. That Molly Coat grease that I'm using is actually grease that was supplied with these pinch rollers from Mitsubishi when they broke. I changed literally hundreds of these things. That's where I ended up with all that grease, was from the pinch arms themselves. They came supplied as a kit from Mitsubishi. That needs to be done on all of these machines. All of these machines with that tower gear and that pinch arm that lifts up and down, that needs to be done. So now that that's done, we're going to clean this machine and send it back to its owner. And this machine is, to my knowledge, still working, because this machine is actually owned by a buddy who now plays old tapes for his grandchildren on the same machine. It still works. Last, the front cover goes on. We have to open up the tape door while we're putting the cover on to make sure it clears the lift arm. Otherwise, the tape door won't open. So hold the door open when you reseat the front cover. Then the control knob goes on. And finally, we can put the screws in the bottom and put the base on. And then we're going to just give the heads a clean and one final test. And then the machine will be sent out on its way. So I hope you guys enjoyed this shorter version of the video, because I think what you want to see is you want to see the content on how to do this, but not necessarily taking out all the screws and everything. So I'm trying to give you guys a look at the procedures in a condensed format for some of these older videos. I'll still produce longer videos, but they aren't going to be anywhere near as long as some of the ones have been in the past. It's one thing that I keep hearing from people is content's great, but it's too long. So, and I agree that some of the old ones did go on a little bit too long, so that's why I am redoing some of these old ones. It's also to benefit my newer viewers that don't necessarily want to scroll back through 2,000 odd videos to find some of these old ones. So I'm revisiting some of the old ones, as I've explained before, to show you guys what needs to be done to maintain this old equipment. This is a pretty simple repair that I think on one of these machines, anybody can do this. It's not rocket science to maintain these machines. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one real soon. Bye for now. The Mitsubishis that are a little bit older than this, or I think a little bit better, these ones still not bad. They've gone away from the solid aluminum die-cast chassis on this one. It's a stamped steel with plastic runners. I think the generation prior to this one was a little bit better because everything was solid aluminum chassis, but this particular machine, one of the better VHS VCRs made over the years, and one that was certainly worth putting a couple belts in a fuse in.